Hello, everybody, and welcome to our NBA Trade Zone podcast, where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, and future. Hi, guys. My name is Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today we are going to continue our preview of the upcoming NBA season with focusing on the Atlantic Division in the East, which is going to be definitely the strongest team in the East, strongest division in the East, and one of the stronger divisions in the NBA.
Yes, so this means no new Jimmy Butler news, and we will continue right along, and we will start with the New York Knickerbockers.
Yeah, so the New York Knicks, last year's record they had was at 29-53, and this year they are projected to, or at least Vegas has their odds at 29.5. My prediction for them is that they are actually going to go under this. It doesn't look like Kristaps is going to be playing much this year, and even if he is, it'll be at the end of the season. So, with the talent that is on this team right now, I don't know who I would argue is the best player. Without Kristaps, I don't feel like that this team is going to win a lot of games, nor should they win a lot of games. I do think that if they want to continue their youth movement, they should try to be one of the worst teams in the league and get one of these, up-and-coming wings that are going to be in next year's draft.
Yeah, I agree. I have their win set at 24. Porzingis is very uncertain whether he'll play, and I think the Knicks are going to do anything to hold him back from playing unless they do trade for Jimmy Butler. I think they're in full tank mode still, I think. I think they'll do just about anything to keep him out of the game action. They lost Kyle O'Quinn this offseason to the Indiana Pacers, who was a solid backup center. I actually like what they did with signing some young guys in Hazonia and Noah Vonleh, but that definitely will not, unless these guys really break out in some kind of way, and unless Moutier breaks out in some kind of way, I don't think that these moves will make much of an impact on whether they win or lose, even depending on how these players perform again, but I don't think they'll make much of an impact in general. So I have their win set at 24. If they win more, great, but I don't think they'll win much more than that this year, depending also on how Kevin Knox does.
Yeah, I would definitely bet the major under here. For our breakout player, I am going to say Kevin Knox is the breakout player just because he seems to be one of the steals of the draft. I think one of the interesting things about him when he was coming up in the draft was that even though he fit the mold of the modern NBA player, one of those that, Boston would have drafted one of the wings who can shoot, who can score, who has the potential for being a good defender because of his size and athleticism. And a lot of teams still passed on him, and I thought that was pretty interesting, even though he didn't have a great season in Kentucky. But he did show, I know this is Summer League, so this is not something that we can go off really well, but he did show that he's an NBA-ready body, and I do think he's going to be successful and that he's going to be a good player in the future.
Yeah, there's a lot of hype surrounding Kevin Knox, especially after his performance in the Summer League. I think the one thing that might hold him back a little bit this year is not having Porzingis to play off of. I think right away, I don't think he'll be the focal point around the offense. Probably a guy like Tim Hardaway might be, which says a lot about how this team is going to look this year. But I think he's going to at least be the focal point around the team. I think especially the fans are going to put a lot of pressure for him to perform right away with Porzingis not there. And it's hard for a rookie to deliver. And we're going to really see how he does based off of that and based off of all the pressure that's put on him.
Yeah, obviously the Knicks don't have a lot of players, so him being put into this position where he might be the best player on the team this year, he probably is at least the most talented player. So there might be a lot of growing pains, but the best thing about it is he doesn't have much to lose. He has to focus on his future, and he'll have 1 year in the NBA where he can develop, work on his game. If he comes in at it with the right attitude, I think it could be a good year for him and a very beneficial one for his future.
Yeah. All right, so for the trade we've come up with for the New York Knicks, I think the New York Knicks are one of the few teams that he had on his list that actually should trade for him. I think the Knicks have to do something with the contracts of Hardaway and Courtney Lee, so they have to get creative here. So I've come up with a trade where they could trade for Jimmy Butler while also trading those two players and opening up another max salary contract for the next offseason. Because a common misconception around the Knicks is that they do have two maximum slots open for the next offseason, and that's a misconception because it's not true. They have Courtney Lee's contract still, which is at around $11 million. Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract, which is about $16 million. They have Noah's dead money, which should be about $5 million because he did get waived and stretched. And they also got Porzingis' cap hold, which is at about $21, $22 million. So that leaves room for one max roster slot, but not two. So the trade I came up with for the New York Knicks is the New York Knicks receiving Jimmy Butler. It's a 3-team trade, by the way, involving the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, the Kings are going to be taking on some dead money here. I have the Kings taking on Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract. I have them also taking on Gorgui Dieng's contract, which both are at about $3 million, and Dieng is about $15 million. Tim Hardaway Jr. is around $16 million. Now, the reason why I have the Knicks doing both is because I don't think anyone is going to want to go play there for the next 3 years in terms of free agents. And even if they are, next year is really a big free agency class. That's where all the key players are. And none of those players are going to go to Sacramento unless something drastic happens. Now, the other thing is, sure, in 2 years, maybe they'll be a little better. Maybe they'll be improved. But in 2 years, as of right now, the best free agents are Anthony Davis, if he decides to opt out of his contract, which unless he gets traded, he probably will. And after that, you have Kyle Lowry and Draymond Green. And those are two good players, but Kyle Lowry will be about 34, 35. Draymond Green will be entering his age 30 year, and he's not a offensive focal point at the least. He is more of a complementary piece than anything else. And I don't see those two players wanting to go play in Sacramento anyway. Sacramento could really afford to take on these two contracts, and of course they're going to get compensated for it here, and that compensation is going to be the 2019 New York Knicks pick, top 5 protected. Now, I'm putting a small protection on it, but not a big one, because for taking on two contracts at about $30 million for the next 3 years, you got to get compensated pretty nicely. And that is what they are going to get. They are going to get compensated pretty nicely with the New York Knicks pick in 2019, top 5 protected. They are also going to receive a second-round pick. A New York Knicks owns rights to the Charlotte pick in 2020 for the second round. They are going to get that pick, and they are going to get a second-round pick from Minnesota as well in 2019. Let's just call it a future 2019 second-round pick. And then I have Minnesota receiving... Zach Randolph, Costa Koufis, Courtney Lee, Frank Ntilikina, and a 2021 first-round pick from the New York Knicks. Now, what is happening here, and then I also have the Knicks receiving Iman Shumpert. So Shumpert, Koufis, and Zach Randolph are all on one-year deals, combined about $30 million. I have Shumpert going, obviously he's on a one-year deal worth at about $11 million to the New York Knicks to make salaries match here. And also Jimmy Butler going there, obviously. With the Minnesota Timberwolves. What they really want in a Jimmy Butler trade, because Tom Thibodeau still wants to win, is he wants veteran pieces, he wants a young piece, and he wants draft picks. Okay? And a lot of people are comparing, or a lot of people believe that what the Minnesota Timberwolves should receive is the same type of package they gave up. And at least that's what Tom Thibodeau wants, I should say. And what we got to understand here is with that package that the Chicago Bulls received last year for Jimmy Butler, at that time, that was seen as a pretty bad package. We got to understand that here that they really swapped the number 7 pick for the number 16 pick. So it's not like they were receiving the number 7 pick. They swapped it for the number 16 pick. So all it was them moving up 9 picks in the draft. And they were also receiving Zach Randolph, Zach LaVine, fresh off a pretty severe injury, and Chris Dunn, who really underperformed in his rookie year, probably because he did not get a lot of playing time, but nonetheless, he underperformed. So At that time, it looked like a pretty bad package, and it did not look like Minnesota was giving up a lot. Now, in retrospect, it looks like the Bulls are going to win this trade. Obviously, it's going to take a few years before we could judge that, but it looks like the Bulls are going to win this trade. But we got to understand that they did not, at the time, get a good package, and furthermore, that was when Jimmy Butler had 2 years remaining on his contract. Now he has 1 year remaining on his contract, so they are not going to get as much as they hoped for. But going back, in this package, they're receiving two good veteran players in Zach Randolph and Courtney Lee. They're receiving a young player in Tilen Kina, and they're receiving a draft pick a couple years down the line, and not to mention Kosta Koufos, who is a rotational player, and Minnesota Timberwolves do need some depth. So, how do you feel about this trade?
Well, if I'm New York, of course, I would say I'm in because I do want to get Jimmy Butler. And I do think New York, if they do receive Jimmy Butler, they can be major players in getting a second star along with him to pair with the young players of Kristaps and Kevin Knox. So if I'm New York, I go with this deal. If I'm Sacramento, I would probably be asking for maybe a top 3 protected pick, not top 5, just because if Jimmy Butler gets hurt, the Knicks are probably going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. The Hawks might be the only team that's worse than them. I mean, Sacramento's probably the other team that's worse than them, but Sacramento they don't have their pick for next year, so they have nothing to lose. So they can go out there and win a few garbage games, while the Knicks would be better off losing them. So in my opinion, if I'm Sacramento, I want to make sure that I get that pick if I'm taking on these contracts. So I'd rather have a top 3 protected or maybe top 2 or something. I would see what I can get the best type of protection. For Minnesota, I'm not huge on this deal just because the only person that you're really getting in this deal is Frankie Ntilikina, and that's not necessarily what Tom Thibodeau wants this year. I mean, Zach Randolph is super old. I'm not high on Courtney Lee at all. I think you're a little bit higher on him than I am. And I think that from what I've heard, the offers out there for Jimmy Butler are pretty terrible. But I mean, I would want at least to get a nice younger wing player who can contribute now, because I do think Tom Thibodeau, is probably pretty sure that this is his last year as coach, and he would want to compete for the playoffs. And this trade, I do not think puts them in any type of contention for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I made this trade off the basis that they are competing now. Courtney Lee is what it is. I mean, he's a decent 3-and-D player. As a veteran, that's what you might have to accept in a deal like this for Jimmy Butler if you want to take on a pick and another young player. Now, again, like you said, Zach Randolph is pretty old, but he was still really productive last year, and he was able to stretch the floor. He hit almost 1-3 a game on 35% shooting for a player like Zach Randolph. That's pretty solid. Kosta Koufos, like I said, nothing more than a rotational big, but he did average about 20 minutes a game. And basically, and not to mention, you also get out of Dieng's contract. So now in 2 years, when Courtney Lee's contract expires and some of these other players, now you have some more money to spend on Karl-Anthony Towns. So you are covered everything you wanted in this deal by getting rid of Dieng and by getting a young player pick and some veterans. The Knicks in this deal, I think they are getting rid of some picks, but for the fact that they do get rid of the 2 contracts in Courtney Lee and Tim Hardaway Jr., that is where they're winning this deal alongside getting Jimmy Butler.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the next team in the East, which is the other New York team, which are the Brooklyn Nets, whose their record last year was 28-54. And this year, Vegas has their odds at 31.5. Once again, I'm going to bet the under just because I know this is, you hear a lot about how this team is going to be decent this year, but I just looked at their roster and there's nothing on it that is no one on it that's very intriguing for me. Unless they do trade for Jimmy Butler, I would be pretty confident in betting the under here.
Yeah, I got them at 31 wins, so just under that. I think they do have a solid roster, and they performed pretty well last year. I mean, 28 wins for a Nets team last year was pretty decent, and they did go out and get some guys in Ed Davis, They traded for, Kenneth Faried, who's not going to do much, obviously. And they did lose Jeremy Lin as well. But hopefully a full year of healthy D'Angelo Russell, or what they're hoping is a healthy D'Angelo Russell, does give them some